Teshidale, and welcome everybody. Before we get into today's materials, I just wanted to do a brief overview of the context of the Tibetan Book of the Dead so that we can recall exactly how the structure is set up. And so initially you could divide it into three parts. There's the Bardo of Dying, the Bardo of Dharmata, and the Bardo of Becoming. Each of those is broken up into additional parts. And so the Bardo of Dying is broken into the dissolution of the elements and the dissolution of consciousness. And then the Bardo of Dharmata, as we'll see today, is actually divided into three parts. And so there's the first is the appearance of the clear light, and then there's a reappearance of clear light. And then there are the appearances of the peaceful and wrathful deities. And then Yama appears, and that marks the transition into the Bardo of Becoming, which is divided into two parts. The first part looks at the karma of your previous lives, and then the final part looks at the potential future. Now that can be further subdivided because at the very end of that there is the tunnel that you enter into and engage in the reflection on your future parents. And so that's an additional part of that last part of the Bardo of Becoming. So that's kind of an overview of where it is and what we're doing here. So for today, we are going into the initial part. We've been looking at introductory material, but we're now going into the actual liberation by hearing document. And so in our text, we're starting on page 33 here. And it begins with an homage in terms of the three kayas, and then goes into the actual test. And it begins by saying, this great liberation through hearing, the means of liberation in the Bardo for yogis of average capacities, is in three parts: the introduction, the main subject matter, and the conclusion. And so there are separate parts that into which the text is divided, and the divisions are not entirely clear. So for example, the first part goes down through day 13, but part 2 starts in day 10. So there's some overlap there. They didn't clarify all of that in the way that it was set up. But in addition to that, it also divides. It says it's for yogins of average capacities, but it also differentiates in several places between the level of accomplishment of different yogins in their practices in terms of how this applies to them. And so we'll see that differentiation a little bit as we go through there. And then it talks about one should have studied the instructions, which should certainly liberate those of highest capacities. Here we go, highest capacities. But if they should not, one should practice the ejection of consciousness. So in other words, if you're the highest capacity, you should achieve liberation in this lifetime, before dying. Okay? But if you don't, and you enter the death process, then there's the possibility of the actual dying. And so the first optional practice here is POA, the ejection of consciousness. And so that's the point at which you would begin by doing POA. Now in the order of recitation document that I gave you as a handout, it talks about several of these pieces. When a person becomes unconscious, well, we have to be careful when we talk about becoming unconscious. It's almost like you can divide it between an outer unconsciousness, that is how it appears to us from the outside, and an inner consciousness or unconsciousness, in which time your experience of consciousness disappears. Because in Tibetan Buddhism, as you recall, when we talked about the fact that we initially go through the process of the dissolution of elements, we're still conscious. Then we go through the process of the dissolution of consciousness. But in looking at it from the outside, a person can lose consciousness, still be breathing, the heart can still be pumping, but they have no sensory consciousness at that time. But they may still have an inner consciousness, things going on that they're experiencing, even though the outer sensory type consciousness has disappeared at that time. So we have to be a little bit careful about the terminology as we go through this. And then if the POA is effective, doing the POA experience in the process of dying, if you're conscious and aware, but you know that you're dying, the signs are there, the doctors are saying, yes, you're dying, you only have a few days to live or something like that, that's when we would do POA on our own. If we go unconscious but are still breathing, that's the time during which an other party could do POA for you, or within actually the first 3.5 days or so of that. Now, there's some difference in terms of the number of days. Trungpa talks about 4 days or even 4.5 days in places. The other text that we looked at talked about 3.5 days. So the problem is that these days that they're describing are from the Bardo experience, not from our experience, and so it's a little bit hard to know exactly when these things are occurring to the person who is either in the throes of dying or has already died. But this is the opportunity for doing the POA for that person at that time. And then when the respiration ceases, that is a change in the experience. And we move from the first experience of the Dharmata into the second experience of the Dharmata. But we'll get into that in a little bit. And there are also some signs of that. After the respiration has ceased and the person appears to be unconscious and the clear light has appeared to them, it gives signs of liberation, of the body glowing, no smell, it looks like they're just sleeping, and there's a sense of happiness when we're in the presence of the body. We experience that sense of happiness. We have no way of knowing how they're experiencing it, of course. So those are some of the things, and then we enter into the first day of the actual intermediate state, which is the third intermediate state, and so we'll be talking about that today as well. So plan A is that we attain enlightenment in this lifetime. Plan B is that we experience it with the POA, perhaps. And plan C would be that we experience it at some other point in the Bardo experience. So moving on then, first we examine the sequence in terms of the signs of death that appear, and actually in the complete book there's a chapter in there that gives a list of various signs of death. As a part of that, they don't always match up with Western signs of death, so you have to be a little bit careful about interpreting those too literally. Then if the ejection of consciousness with the POA doesn't work, then we begin with the process of reading the liberation by hearing. There are some preliminary things that we read before we actually get into the first day experiences here. And we sit next to the person if their body is present. If they are not present, then we can sit next to their bed or a chair or something like that and visualize them. Another thing that you can do that's not mentioned in this text is that it can be helpful to have a photograph of the person. That can help draw their consciousness into the presence there. And as a result of that, it can make it more effective in terms of the reading process of this. But there are some experiences or other activities that you do have to be careful of. These are things that you normally want to be careful about with anybody who is dying, and that is crying and wailing and carrying on and those kinds of things. You want it to be a peaceful experience for the person, not only when they initially are dying, but also after that has happened and their consciousness is still aware of some of the things that are going on in the immediate area. And then we get into the teaching itself, and on page 34 here in the second paragraph, it talks about making an elaborate offering. Usually this is connected with the POA. We make an offering of what is available plus imagined offerings, often the same kind of things that we might imagine when we're doing our Dharma practices. And then, and here it says we make what is available and visualize the rest. And then we go through some other prayers. And so I wanted to take a look at those other prayers. They're in the appendix, which is starts on page 96. Now, the first thing that I would point out related to these prayers is that a lot of them are worded. It tells us to recite the prayers for the dying person. But a lot of these are worded as if they are related to ourselves. So you have to be a little bit careful of the pronouns and so forth that we use when you're reading it for another person. So there's a brief introductory paragraph that says, at the time of one's death, one should always call on the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas for rescue. One should make material and mental offerings to the three jewels and hold fragrant incense in one's hand, and then say these words with the intense power of concentration. So you might be able to say those for yourself, but more likely it would be somebody else saying those things for you at that point. And so let's just read through this here. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas dwelling in the 10 directions, compassionate, all-knowing, with the 5 kinds of eyes, loving protectors of all sentient beings, come to this place by the power of compassion and accept these material and mental offerings. So we have made these offerings. O compassionate ones, you possess understanding, wisdom, loving compassion, effective action, and protecting power beyond the reach of thought. O compassionate ones, this person, and then we would give their name, is going from this world to the other shore. He or she, as the case might be, is leaving this world. He is dying without choice. He has no friends. He is suffering greatly. He has no refuge. He has no protector. He has no allies. The light of this life has set. He is going to another world. He is entering the dense darkness. He is falling down a deep precipice. He is entering the thick forest. He is pursued by the power of karma. He is entering a great wilderness. He is swept away by the great ocean. He is driven on by the wind of karma. He is going where there is no solid ground. He is embarking on a great battle. He is seized by the great evil spirit. He is terrified by the messengers of the Lord of Death. He is entering the existence after existence because of his karma. He is helpless. The time has come when he must go on alone or without a friend. Now, that long list of things are a very brief summary of the kinds of experiences that occur during the Bardo. So that's the reference here. O compassionate ones, be a refuge to him, name inserted, who has no refuge. Protect him, defend him, keep him from the great darkness of the Bardo, turn him aside from the great hurricane of karma, protect him from the great fear of the Lord of Death, deliver him from the long and dangerous pathway of the Bardo. O compassionate ones, do not let your compassion be small. Rescue him, do not let him go to the 3 lower realms. Do not forget your former vows, but quickly send out the power of your compassion. This is also spread throughout more individualized way in the readings of the entire document. And so we will see this. We'll see the experience of day 1, for example, followed by a prayer. Please help us in getting through the experiences and help us attain liberation and so forth. And so we'll see this pattern as we go through day by day. This gets repeated over and over again. And then, may the 3 jewels be a refuge from suffering in the Bardo. And this prayer then is reread, so a total of 3 times, or possibly 7 times. But the minimum that should be done is 3 times, again, assuming they really have the time to do that. And then on the next page, the main verses of the 6 bardos. And so there's a paragraph here, or a verse, related to each of the different bardos. So we have the bardo of birth, the bardo of dreams, the bardo of samadhi meditation, the bardo of the moment before death, the bardo of dharmata, and the bardo of becoming. So all of the 6 bardos are mentioned here, and then there's a concluding verse as well. So now when we enter the Bardo of birth, now when the Bardo of birth is dawning upon me, I will abandon, and again, here a pronoun, it's focus on me now. So we would need to change that to be appropriate for the individual for whom we are reading this. I will abandon laziness from which life has no time, enter the undistracted path of study, reflection, and meditation, making projections and mind the path, and realize the three kayas. Now that I have once attained the human body, there is no time on the path for the mind to wander. So this is related to the Bardo of birth. So it's assuming now we have our life during which to study, practice, and so forth at that point. Now when the Bardo of dreams is dawning upon me, I will abandon the corpse-like sleep of careless ignorance and let my thoughts enter their natural state without distraction, controlling and transforming dreams in luminosity. I will not sleep like an animal, but unify completely sleep and practice. So dream yoga becomes the practice. So we practice 24/7 now when we're awake as well as when we are asleep. Then the third one, now when the Bardo of Samadhi meditation dawns upon me, I will abandon the crowd of distractions and confusions and the rest of the boundless state without grasping or disturbance, firm in the two practices, visualization and complete. This basically refers to the generation stage and completion stages, although it tends to focus on it in the context of what we call generation stage practices. So the visualization is the first part of actually visualizing the deity and reciting the mantra, and then when all of that dissolves is what it's referring to here when it talks about dissolution, not the completion stage practices. And then, firm in the two practices. So then at this time of meditation, one-pointed, free from activity, I will not fall into the power of confused emotions. And then we get to the moment before death. Now when the Bardo of the moment before death dawns upon me, I will abandon all grasping, yearning, and attachment, enter undistracted into clear awareness of the teaching, and eject my consciousness into the space of unborn mind. So that ejection of consciousness is the poet. As I leave this compound body of flesh and blood, I will know it to be a transitory illusion. Then Dharmata. Now when the Bardo of Dharmata dawns upon me, I will abandon all thoughts of fear and terror. I will recognize whatever appears as my projection and know it to be a vision of the Bardo. And now that I have reached this crucial point, I will not fear the peaceful and wrathful ones, my own projections. And then finally the Bardo of becoming. Now when the Bardo of becoming dawns upon me, I will concentrate my mind one-pointedly and strive to prolong the results of good karma. Close the womb entrance and think of resistance. This is the time when perseverance and pure thought are needed. Abandon jealousy and meditate on the Guru with his consort. So those are references to some different practices that can be done. And this is kind of the last ditch effort, if you will, of the various opportunities that occur during these bardos. And then the concluding verse, with mind far off, not thinking of death's coming, performing these meaningless activities, returning empty-handed now would be complete confusion. The need is recognition, holy Dharma. So why not practice Dharma at this very moment? From the mouths of the Siddhas come these words, if you do not keep your Guru's teaching in your heart, will you not become your own deceivers? So the admonition here is really for us now to do these practices in order to prepare for these Bardo experiences. But it is, again, something that would be comforting to the individual who is dying. They haven't achieved the unconscious, complete unconscious state yet, so we could read this to them, and that familiarity would be comforting to them to recognize, oh yes, okay, I've been there, I've done that, I'm prepared for this, I'm prepared for that, and so forth as we go through the process. And again, we read that 3 or 7 times. Then we go to the inspiration prayer for deliverance from the dangerous pathway of the Bardo. And here it goes into the experience of the different deities of the 5 Buddha families. And so first there's an homage And then when through confusion I wander in samsara on the undistracted light path of study, reflection, and meditation, may the gurus of the sacred lineage go before me, their consorts, the hosts of dakinis behind me. And that language is language that you will see in there frequently. So the Buddha is ahead and the consort is behind. So they are there collectively together in order to help you through the process. Help me to cross the Bardo's dangerous pathway and bring me to the perfect Buddha state. When through intense ignorance I wander in samsara on the luminous light path of the Dharmadhatu wisdom, may the blessed Vairocana go before me, his consort, the queen of Vajra space, behind me. Help me to cross the Bardo's dangerous pathway and bring me to the perfect Buddhist state. So you can see that the language begins to repeat itself. So the main difference there has to do with the deity and the consort that are there in order to help us with that. But the particular wisdom of that Buddha family is also mentioned. And so here we have Dharmadhatu wisdom. And so the next one then we have the mirror-like wisdom, and Vajrasattva in this case, or it could be Akshobhya. And the consort, Buddha Lochana, behind me. And then we move on to the next one, the wisdom of equality, and Ratnasambhava and his consort Mamaki. And then we go to the next one is discriminating wisdom, and Buddha Amitabha and his consort Pandara, or Pandara Vashini. And then we move on to action or all-accomplishing wisdom, and Amoghasiddhi and his consort Samayatara. And then finally we have the concluding paragraph of that part in this. After that, those cover the 5 days, and then on the 6th day we have them all reappearing together, and then on the 7th day we have the appearance of the Vidyadharas. And so that one is in the next verse here. When through strong unconscious tendencies I wander in samsara, the luminous light path of the innate wisdom, may the Vidyadhara warriors go before me. And then their consorts, a host of dakinis behind me, help me to cross the Bardo's dangerous pathway and bring me to the perfect Buddha state. And then when through the fierce profusion of projections I wander in samsara, the light path abandoning all fear, may the blessed ones, peaceful and wrathful, go before me. A host of dakinis, queens of space behind me, help me cross the Bardo's dangerous pathway and bring me to the perfect Buddha state. So referring to all of the peaceful and wrathful deities here, various manifestations. And so then it begins to talk about the different elements. May the element of space not arise up as an enemy. May I see the realm of the blue Buddha. May the element of water not arise as an enemy. May I see the realm of the white Buddha. So it's going through the Buddhas by color now and the element associated with each. May the element earth not arise as an enemy. May I see the realm of the yellow Buddha. May the element of fire not rise as an enemy. May I see the realm of the red Buddha, and so forth. Air and the green Buddha, the rainbow of elements and all of the Buddhas. And then it goes through the various other experiences, sensory experiences in those early Bardo experiences, the sounds, the lights and rays not arise up as enemies. And may I see the infinite realms of the peaceful and wrathful ones. May I know the sounds as my own sound, meaning that the sounds are my own experience. These are the things that I'm seeing are really in my own mind. They're not coming at me from outside, even though that's what they appear to be doing. May I know all the lights as my own light. These would be the lights of the background as well as the lights of the ray of light that shoots out from the heart of the Buddha into our heart, and the dull light that attracts us into the various realms. And then I know the lights as my own light. May I know the rays as my own ray. So he differentiates here between the rays and the lights. May I spontaneously know the Bardo as myself. And that means that's a reference to our mind, okay? May I attain the realms of the three kayas. So may I attain Buddhahood and embody that as the three kayas. And again, we repeat this 3 or 7 times. Then finally we have the Bardo prayer, which protects from fear. And we're told that it can be a very fearful experience to go through the Bardo. And so it's appropriate to have something here that helps us prepare for the possibility of that fearful experience. But if we recognize all of these things as being just experiences of our own mind, that fear does never manifest. But in case it does, plan B here, we have an option. When the journey of my life, and again, pronouns, if you're reading this for somebody else, you may need to change these. And the journey of my life has reached its end, and since no relatives go with me from this world, I wander in the Bardo state alone. May the peaceful and wrathful Buddhas send out the power of their compassion and clear away the dense darkness of ignorance. When parted from my beloved ones, wandering alone, my own projections. So we're referring to the things that we see, the experiences we see that are really our own mind. Empty forms appear. May the Buddhas send out the power of their compassion so that the Bardo terrors do not come. When the 5 luminous lights of wisdom shine, fearlessly may I recognize myself. When the forms of the peaceful and wrathful ones appear, fearless and confident, may I recognize the Bardo. And each of these occurrences where there's the opportunity to recognize these is the opportunity for enlightenment. So as we actually read through the text, we begin to see there's time after time after time. There are so many opportunities. How could we not attain enlightenment here? When I suffer through the power of evil karma, may the peaceful and wrathful Buddhas clear away suffering. When the sound of Dharmata roars like 1,000 thunders, may it be transformed into the sound of Mahayana teaching. When I follow my karma without a refuge, may the peaceful and wrathful Buddhas be my refuge. When I suffer in the karma of unconscious tendencies, may the samadhi of bliss and luminosity arise. At the moment of the spontaneous birth of the Bardo becoming, may the false teachings of the tempters not arise. When I arrive wherever I wish by supernatural power, may the illusory terrors of evil karma not arise. And so here, when we get to the later stages of the experience of the Bardo of becoming, there are temptations that tend to draw us into one of these different realms. Now we've gotten past all of the really good kinds of things and gotten into some experiences that both are a little bit terrorizing and also tend to suck us in order to avoid the bad things going on in our consciousness. When savage beasts of prey are roaming, may it become the sound of Dharma, the 6 syllables. When I am chased by snow, rain, wind, and darkness, may I receive the clear divine eye of wisdom. May all sentient beings of the same realm in the Bardo, free from jealousy, be born in a higher state. And this is a reference to seeing other beings that are kind of floating around in this Dharma experience as well. And then when great thirst and hunger are caused by passions, may the pain of thirst and hunger, heat and cold not arise. When I see my future parents in union, may I see the peaceful and wrathful Buddhas with their consorts, with the power to choose my birthplace for the good of others. May I receive the perfect body adorned with the auspicious signs. And so this is where we've entered that tunnel of conception, and then seeing these couples together in union, and there are again opportunities for us to use that to practice and attain enlightenment even at that point. Obtaining for myself a perfect human body, may all who see and hear me at once be liberated. May I not follow all my evil karma, but follow and increase what merit I may have. So it's a plea there to take advantage of the good karma that we have, to be reborn in a way that we can use that to then help future or other beings. Whenever I am born at that very place, may I meet the yidam of this life face to face, knowing how to walk and talk as soon as I am born. May I attain the power of non-forgetfulness and remembrance of past lives. And this is a reference to some of the Buddhas being born at a point where they could walk and they could talk and give Dharma teachings even at the early moments of their birth. In all the stages of learning, high, middle, and low, may I understand just the hearing, by hearing, thinking, and seeing. Wherever I am born, may that land be blessed, so that all sentient beings may be happy. O peaceful and wrathful Buddhas, may I and others, or you might use we in that case if you're talking to someone else, become like you yourselves, just as you are, with your forms and your auspicious marks. May your retinues, your long life, and your realms. And then concluding verse, Samattabhadra, the peaceful and wrathful ones, infinite compassion, the power of truth of the pure Dharmata, and followers of Tantra in one-pointed meditation, may their blessings fulfill this inspiration prayer. And again, we would repeat this 3 or 7 times. So now let's go back again to page 34 where we left off there. So here then it talks about this being divided into 3 parts, and this is the overall text. So then in the next paragraph it says, first, showing the luminosity of the bardo of the moment before death. And so this point we are looking at the appearance of the clear light. So this is a little bit contradictory in terms of the way that it's normally explained, that when we die, remember we talked about the dissolution of the elements and then the dissolution of consciousness, everything goes black, and then from the reappearance of that, and that blackness, that darkness is considered to be the loss of consciousness and death from a Buddhist point of view. Okay? And so then the appearance of clear light happens after that. Okay, so to say here, first showing the luminosity of the bardo of the moment before death is a little bit conflicting with some of the other sources. But being that as it may, the basic idea here is to keep the sequence of events in mind. So then we recognize this, and this is an opportunity to bypass the bardo experience. We recognize that we achieve enlightenment, and so we reach Dharmakaya, okay, Buddhahood. And then it says the method of instruction. So it divides these different sections up a little bit, and says this is best if the is done by the principal guru, the main teacher, somebody you're familiar with, you're comfortable with, and so forth. So the familiarity with their voice would be helpful in this. But otherwise it could be done by another Dharma brother, it says. So this could be a Dharma brother, could be someone else that you've had teachings from, another Lama, or it could be somebody that you've had empowerments with, or you've taken classes with, and somebody else in the Sangha, and so forth. Those would all be different forms of a Dharma brother or sister, as the case might be. Or a spiritual friend in some lineage. It could be somebody that you haven't actually had teachings with, but could be somebody else who is a practitioner. So a number of possibilities here. And then it says if none of these are found, just somebody who can read clearly so you can possibly hear it and then read it several times. So there's all kinds of opportunities here that tends to go through, give you an ideal and then a somewhat lesser ideal and then a sort of kind of ideal, and then if all else fails, there's still another opportunity there. But one of the things that I might suggest is that if you have a will, something like that, you may want to spell that kind of thing out on what your desires are, what you want to happen, or have a written statement of some kind, even if it's not in your will, that expresses what you would like to happen as a part of that experience, so that the people that you've empowered or have asked to help take care of you at that moment know what your expectations, your wishes are, and then they can do their best to try and fulfill those. And so then here, so we have at the top of page 35, the time of instruction when respiration has ceased. Okay, so the breathing stops, so now we are considered to be dead from a Western point of view. The prana is absorbed into the wisdom duty, that's the heart drop now, and the luminosity shines clearly in the consciousness. So this again is the clear light, appearance of the clear light. And then this happens, it says, for a short period of time, the time it takes to eat a meal. Now, I suppose that depends on whether you went to Poca-Cosa or you went to McDonald's. There can be quite a bit of difference in the amount of time that it might take to eat a meal, depending on the circumstances there. But the idea is that it takes a little while. It's not a really long period of time. And other places, the text talking about this experience also indicate that it will vary depending upon the degree of your ability to maintain the clear light or rigpa in your practice prior to this experience. So the longer that you're able to maintain the experience of rigpa, let's say, in your practice, normal practice in life, the longer you can do that, the longer the experience is going to be of dharmata. And the good thing about that is that the longer it is, the more likely you're going to recognize what's really going on. Oh, yeah, I remember now. This is something that I practiced before. This is the clear light. And then you're able to attain that experience. If you have no experience whatsoever, you've never even heard of the clear light or something like that, the texts say that it will go by in a flash, and it's like a little blip on the TV screen or something like that, and you kind of notice it, but no concept whatsoever about what it really was. So again, it becomes important to do these kinds of practices during this life so that it helps us to be prepared for these experiences as we attain them. And then the method of instruction here, it is best if ejection of consciousness is effected when the respiration is just about to stop. Now this is going backwards just a little bit because we were just talking about up above when the respiration has ceased. So sometimes these paragraphs can seem to go a little bit out of order. But basically here, when it appears that, well, we'll just go through this part of it because it's at this point where we would read this section. So if we see signs that the POA didn't work, whether they do the POA for themselves or we do POA for them, there's no signs that it worked, then we're told to go on and read this section. So it says, "O son of noble family," and you give the name of the person. Now, I prefer the translation that is in the book, the complete translation book, which says, "O child of Buddha nature," rather than "son of noble family," which sounds kind of like a royalty kind of a statement. But the Shambhala group kind of likes that sort of language, so either one is okay. But I have re-entered all of that, so when I use this book to actually read this, I've got it rewritten in there, and so you'll hear me say, "Oh, child of Buddha nature," repeatedly here as I read it. So, and give the name of the individual. Now the time has come for you to seek a path. As soon as your breath stops, what is called the basic luminosity of the first Bardo, which your guru has already shown you, will appear to you. So that certainly assumes that they've done this practice before. This is the Dharmata. Open and empty like space, luminous, void, pure naked mind without center or circumference. Recognize then and rest in that state. And I too will show you at the same time. So this will be helping you as we get through that level of practice, and then it says to repeat it over and over again until the person stops breathing. So again, those are the things. Then it also here it's going backwards a little bit more, because when we do POA, we would prefer that the person, unless you're able to actually sit up, that would be actually the more preferable position to be in for POA. But if the person's not able to sit up, it tells us in the text to have them lie on their right side, if possible, and with the hand on their cheek, the lion posture of the Buddha when he passed away. So we would do that. If you can do that, it's not absolutely essential, but we would do that, and then we would do the POA for them or guide them through the POA if they were sufficiently conscious at that point. So then it says, then we would do the reading, and the luminosity of Dharmata, the Dharmakaya, would be the opportunity to achieve that. And then it says that the prana then seeks into the avaduti, that's the central channel, and then between the ceasing of breath and the ceasing of pulsation. So the breath has stopped, but in this case the heart is still pumping. Okay. Now in here it has some things where at that point you would actually place your fingers on the arteries and stop the flow of blood in the neck. I'm not sure I would do that at that point. In the first place, it could actually be considered murder in our society. And so I don't think, because the heart hasn't stopped, I don't think that that probably is a good idea. So my recommendation is to avoid that, even though it does say that here in a couple of different places. And then, so then it just mentions repeating this process until there are signs of something happening, liberation. And to continue doing this for up to 4.5 days. So this is one of those places where the number of days varies a little bit between translations for some reason. Then we strive to show the luminosity for whatever period of time that is. Now again, the number of days is the experience of the dying person's number of days. It's not our number of days. So it's a little hard to know how long of a period that actually is. So we can go by what our days are to give it an approximation, but we don't really know for sure what it is that they're actually experiencing as a part of that. So now I'm going to take just a brief break to see if anybody has questions.